Welcome to the screencast lesson for quiz number 4. This is the lesson for quiz number 4. And today I'm going to use a different website to look at the birds just to give you, make you aware of a new, different website than the one we've been using. We have been using the All About Birds from Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and this is the Audubon Guide to North American Birds. So I'm going to go through the birds that you will need to know in addition to the birds you've already learned for quiz number 4. So starting off, we're looking at the gray catbird. The gray catbird is a fairly common bird that lives in shrubby areas and like near edges of forests and things. So you see it a lot when you're hiking in places that are not in the middle of the woods. You don't see this bird, in the middle of the forest. You see him in the edges. And this bird is identified by its black cap. It's a solid gray bird with a black cap, a black tail, and rusty undertail coverts. And when we will at some point be learning more about different parts of the bird, but birds have these things called coverts, which are the feathers that cover other feathers. Coverts, okay? So these cover the feathers, the ends of the feathers on the undertail. So these are the undertail coverts. And birds often have color there. As you might suspect, it's probably a good place to hide color. So you can still be camouflaged because it doesn't show up all that easily, but you can display it by flicking up your tail when you want to. So this is the gray catbird. And this is a bird that you do need to know by sight and sound. So the catbird is named for its sound. It sounds like a cat sometimes. But really this bird is in the category of birds that are called mimics. They have very complex vocalizations and they learn songs from sounds around them as well. Catbirds don't do that a whole lot, but they do have very complex vocalizations. We're going to learn another couple of different kinds of mimics throughout this semester. The catbird is the one who never repeats one of those songs more than once in succession. So it's like a series of little phrases, okay, that sound all different from each other. And then every once in a while, there's this mewing sound, this cat-like sound. Actually, I was just playing it, and it was kind of making my cat go crazy, so it must be a pretty good imitation. Sometimes I think it sounds more almost like a crying baby than it does a cat, but let me play it for you. So to find the songs on this website, you go down here to the bottom, and there's a couple of options, but I'm going to play this one first. So there you hear the complex, vocalizations in these little phrases, and here this is going to add in the mews as well. So if you're walking along and you hear what sounds like a distressed cat or a crying baby near the edge of a woods, it's probably a catbird. So that is one of the birds that you will need to know. Okay, so let's move on to the next bird. In this quiz, we're going to start to get into learning some owls. So one of the owls that we have around is the great horned owl. And you can see why it's called the great horned owl. It has, these are not really its ears, these are really tufts of feathers that are near the ears of the owl, but they have these feather tufts that look like sort of horns, so great horned owl. Let's look at another photo. So we're going to learn two owls, and I'll actually do them side by side. So we'll do the barred owl next, but this is the great horned owl. And notice along its chest it has stripes, very thin stripes, going across its body, horizontal, okay? That's important because the barred owl has the opposite. Its stripes go up and down its chest. So, great horned owl, it's kind of a a brownish gray bird. It can be fairly gray. And they have different morphs, different colors. But look for big ear tufts. It's a large owl, and it has a striped chest with horizontal striping, not bars like the barred owl, but stripes. So you do need to know the call on this one. And let's hear it. The call is, people say, try to remember it in different ways. I think the easiest is probably thinking like, excuse me, I have a cold. Well, just listen to it and see what you think. Here, let me do this one. So often it is, some people say it says like, who the heck are you? Or I suppose it could be, who the hell are you? So that's a good way to remember it. You can come up with your own phrase if you want. And let's compare that now to the barred owl, which you also need to know this week. So it's barred, like bars, and as you can see, it has stripes running, or bars, I should say, to help you remember the name, down its chest. Okay, so from its head down to its tail, it has these bars, this barring. Notice no ear tufts, a very rounded head. Okay, it's also a large owl, but no, not quite as large as a great horned. We have lots of these around. All my birding friends have been posting pictures of barred owls that they've been seeing. Barred owls are very active right now because this is getting to nesting time. Believe it or not, owls have their young in what we think of as the middle of winter. And there are reasons for this, in part because they have to train their young how to hunt. Some birds, have a lot of instincts, but a lot of these larger birds, they're actually skills that they're taught by their parents. So that is one of the reasons they're born so early, so that by the time they have to survive another winter, they're skilled at being able to catch things. So the barred owl has a classic phrase that everyone talks about. It's like, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? So here it is. Here's another one. So you can hear that one had a lot more of the you all at the end. They make other sounds, but that's the classic song that they use, and that's what I'm going to be quizzing you on. So those are our two owls, the great horned owl and the barred owl. Moving on to a woodpecker we're going to add. Remember we had the yellow-bellied sapsucker previously. Now we're going to learn the hairy woodpecker. Let me see. I don't think we have the downy this week. No, we don't. Okay. So the hairy woodpecker is has some similarities to yellow-bellied sapsucker. I think woodpeckers, you should start sort of being able to tell a woodpecker when you see a woodpecker. Notice how they sit upright on the tree like this. They actually have a very stiff tail that they prop against the tree to help them steady themselves. Their toes are a little different. They have two toes in the front and two toes in the back. A lot of the perching birds, songbirds, have three toes in the front and one in the back. So this is a little different, and that's partly because of the way they perch on the tree. These two toes in the back give them more of a solid perch. Now the hairy woodpecker, maybe we did have the downy, because I remember talking about the size of the beak. And the downy woodpecker, the size of the beak is less than half the width of the head, okay? So look with the hairy woodpecker, the beak is almost the width of the head. Well, it's much larger. It's not quite also, it doesn't have as many of the fuzzy feathers right here along the edge of the beak. So be looking for that. There are a few other markers. The hairy is bigger also, and that's an important piece of this. But when you're new to this and you weren't seeing them side by side, how do you know what bigger is? So that's going to take some practice. So I recommend looking at the beak as a defining characteristic when you're first starting. There's a few other things with the amount of white on its back, but we're not going to talk about that too much. Remember, as with most woodpeckers, the male has a little red on the head. The female does not have any red, so the female would just be black and white. And you do not need to know the call for this one, but maybe I'll play it for you. Remember the downy had a descending whinny, and this has a whinny that sort of stays more on the same pitch. Let's see if this shows you. That's just the peak sound they make. The downies make a little pick, and the hairies make a peak. But let's try to see if it's here. Maybe it's the sputters. Here we go. There we go. So hear that whinny, that sputtering noise, and it's all on the same pitch as the downy is descending. But I don't want to get into that too much because you don't need to remember it for the quiz. You could always learn it just for fun. Just saying. Okay. Now we're gonna go with one of the birds that I'm often asked about, and that is indigo bunting. Oops, sorry. This is a bird that is rather stunning. Look at the blue, and it is this blue. It is incredibly blue, and it's not a super common feeder bird, and so people don't really even know that it's out there sometimes. But it's a fairly common bird in open sort of edges areas. Okay, it's again not going to be in the middle of the forest. You're going to find it in edges, grassland areas, that sort of thing. But it's a stunningly almost solid blue bird. It does have some black on the wing and some black on the tail as well. But you can tell it's different than an eastern bluebird, right? The eastern bluebird had a chest that was white with a little rusty color at the top. The blue is also a little bit different color than a bluebird. Notice a thick beak as well. It's different than a bluebird. So hopefully you can tell an indigo bunting from a bluebird because of its solid blue color with a little black on the wing and tail. And you do not need to know the call on this one. It's a little bit complex and I think hard to learn, so we're going to pass on that. Okay, this is a bird that probably a lot of you have encountered before, and that's the red-winged blackbird. The red-winged blackbird is also a rather stunning bird in its own way. Sometimes, whoa. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can, nope. Not sure what happened, so we'll go back to red-winged blackbird. Okay. As I was saying, it is rather a stunning bird as well. Often, when you see them from a distance, they just look black. And you get up close, and they have this really stunning, the males have this really stunning red shoulder epaulette. It's called an epaulette. If you know about military uniforms, sometimes they have a little shoulder thing on the sort of on the downward side of the shoulder, and it's called an epaulette. And so this is referred to it as an epaulette. So a red epaulette with a yellow a stripe on the edge. Now this is really interesting because red-winged blackbirds actually can control their feathers along here to change the amount of this that is showing. So again, you know, you don't want to be bright if you don't have to be. So this is a way to be camouflaged, but then have this brilliant, bright splash when you need it. Of course, when we are hanging around red-winged blackbirds, they're agitated, and when they're agitated, they show how big and strong they are by showing their epaulettes. So we tend to see them a lot, but sometimes when you see them at a feeder, all you'll see is just this yellowy or sometimes whitish stripe, and you won't even see any of that bright orange-red coloration. Um, these birds are really common in fields, and they're seed eaters. And they also love to be around wetlands. So wetland areas, you'll see them in cattails. They nest in cattails along the edges of marshes and wetlands. Here's a good picture of them displaying. This is a very agitated red-winged blackbird. Somebody's in his territory and he's not happy about it. Just to let you know, the females look very different. Females almost look like a sparrow. Um, so that's kind of interesting. You do need to know the sound, the song, and the song is, I think of it as conqueree. Here it is. To me, that's the sound of springtime. You're walking by, the wetland, and there's just hundreds of red-winged blackbirds making that song. Okay. Next is another. We got a lot of really pretty birds this week. This is the wood duck, and you may have seen this before, but look at this thing. Isn't that amazing? Wood duck looks to me like something you should see, I don't know, in a Japanese painting and not necessarily in the woodland in Vermont. You know what? Us northerners don't get to see quite as many brilliant colored birds as other places in the world sometimes, but this is an exception. Incredibly detailed, intricate bird with a greenish head and black markings and yellow. Very stunning. Here's it on the water, so you can really see it in its glory. It's got this little tuft that hangs down, very striking sides and markings. I think it's recognizable. I don't think you'll have any trouble learning it. That's the wood duck, and you do not need to know the call on that one. Sorry about the beeping in the background if it's coming through. And then we're just going to finish up here with one more, and that is the Cooper's hawk. So if you remember with the red-tailed hawk, I mentioned that is referred to as a buteo. Buteos have wide wings and short tails, and Cooper's hawks are different. They're called an occipiter. And occipiters have more narrow wings and longer, skinnier tails. Now that tail is fairly fanned out, but for example, when it sits, notice how long that tail is and how straight. It has very distinct bars on its tail, so a long tail with distinct bars. It's a smaller hawk. So let's look at another one here. Notice there's reddish. Let's see if I can get a picture of his chest. These aren't great. That's an immature. We don't have a really good picture of his chest, but it has these reddish stripes. The adults have these reddish stripes. Male and females are the same. Females are actually a bit bigger than these hawks. Long, straight, barred, big bars, thick barred tail. And when they are flying, they have skinnier wings. And notice how much longer the tail is. The red tail almost touches its wings when it's spread out. So close. And this one's very distinctly out and long. Okay, there are a lot of hawks. Hawks are kind of hard, but for the hawks that we're looking at, that's a way to distinguish the Cooper's hawk from the red-tailed hawk, and you do not need to know a call on that. So those are our birds for quiz 4.